Lillian Moore adjusted the strap of her dress, glancing around the lavish ballroom of the Architectural Awards ceremony. The room buzzed with conversations, the clinking of glasses, and laughter that reverberated off the ornate walls. This was her world, a place where her talent and influence were undeniable. Yet, tonight, she felt a strange unease creeping over her, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself that this was a celebration. Another award was about to be added to her impressive collection, and she should be basking in the glory of her achievements. But just as she took a sip of her champagne, her gaze fell on a young woman across the room. The girl, standing beside a tall man with a commanding presence, had something about her, an aura, a look in her eyes, that sent a jolt through Lillian's heart. Her hand trembled, and she placed the glass down, trying to steady herself. She squinted, the crowd blurring around the girl as everything else seemed to fade into the background. The young woman's laugh, the way she brushed her hair behind her ear, the slight tilt of her head, it was all achingly familiar. Lillian's heart pounded as a long-buried instinct whispered in her ear. No, it couldn't be. Memories of her daughter, Emily, flashed through her mind. A child snatched away decades ago, leaving a gaping hole that no success or recognition could fill. The pain of that loss was something she had locked away, buried deep beneath her career and accolades. But now, as she watched this girl, that wound was torn open. She knew it was impossible. Her daughter would be in her 30s now, not this girl's age. But still, she couldn't shake the feeling. Compelled by something she couldn't name, Lillian moved through the room, her eyes locked on the girl and the man beside her. She dodged servers and guests, her pace quickening as a sense of urgency took over. The man turned slightly, and Lillian's breath caught in her throat. Adam Thompson. She had heard the name before, a philanthropist with a mysterious past, known for his generous donations and low-profile lifestyle. But why would he be here? And more importantly, who was this girl with him? As she drew closer, she could see the girl's face more clearly. The resemblance was striking, too striking. Lillian's mind raced, the logical side of her screaming that this was just a coincidence. But a mother's heart knows things that logic can't explain. "Excuse me," she murmured as she squeezed between two groups of people, her eyes never leaving the girl. Just a few more steps and she would be close enough to say something, anything. But then, the girl turned, and their eyes met. Time seemed to freeze. Lillian's heart ached with a fierce, almost unbearable longing. The girl's gaze held a flicker of confusion, then politeness, as if trying to place where she might have seen Lillian before. Adam noticed and shifted, putting his arm around the girl protectively, almost possessively. The gesture made Lillian's skin prickle with unease. As if sensing her discomfort, Adam's eyes met hers, his expression one of calm authority. "Lillian Moore," he said, his voice smooth, carrying a hint of something she couldn't quite place. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Adam Thompson." Lillian nodded, her mouth dry. "Likewise, Mr. Thompson." She forced a smile, her gaze flicking back to the girl. "And this is Stella," Adam said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My daughter." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Daughter. Her mind spun. The resemblance, the age, everything fit. But how? She struggled to keep her expression neutral as 1,000 thoughts collided in her head. Could it be? Could this girl truly be Emily? The rational part of her screamed that it was madness, that she was projecting her pain onto a stranger. But something deeper, more primal, refused to let go of the possibility. Stella's polite smile faltered under Lillian's intense gaze. "It's nice to meet you, Ms. Moore," she said, her voice soft but steady. Lillian barely managed a nod. "Nice to meet you too, Stella." Her voice sounded distant, even to her own ears. She turned back to Adam, trying to keep her composure. "I've heard a lot about your work. You're quite the philanthropist." Adam's smile widened, but his eyes remained guarded. "I try to do what I can. But tonight is about celebrating your achievements, Ms. Moore. I've been a great admirer of your work." His words were flattering, but Lillian felt no pleasure. All she could think about was Stella. She needed to know more, but how? She couldn't just come out and ask if this was her daughter. It was absurd. It would make her look insane. Yet, the need to know was overpowering. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'd love to hear more about your projects sometime," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Perhaps we could set up a meeting?" Adam's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Of course, Ms. Moore. I'd be honored." The conversation drifted into polite pleasantries, but Lillian's mind was elsewhere, her heart beating in a frantic rhythm. When Adam excused himself and Stella, Lillian watched them walk away, feeling a sense of loss she couldn't quite comprehend. She needed to find out who Stella really was. There was too much at stake, too much she had to know. As the evening wore on, Lillian's mind churned with possibilities and plans. She would dig into Adam's past, uncover his secrets, and find out the truth. Because if Stella was really Emily, then everything she thought she knew about that terrible day, about her own life, was about to change forever. And for the first time in decades, Lillian felt a spark of something she had long believed dead: hope. Lillian barely slept that night. Her mind was consumed by the image of Stella's face, every feature etched into her memory. The resemblance was undeniable, but she knew she needed more than a mother's intuition to confront the past. She needed facts, hard evidence that would either confirm or crush her suspicions. The next morning, she sat in her office, her eyes red and tired, staring at the computer screen. She had spent hours scrolling through public records, trying to find any information that might connect Adam Thompson to Emily's disappearance, but there was nothing. It was as if the man had materialized out of thin air a few years ago, his past wrapped in shadows. But Lillian was relentless. She wasn't one to give up, especially not when it came to something this important. She picked up her phone and dialed the number of a private investigator she had used in the past for personal matters. His name was Jack Reynolds, a man known for his discretion and effectiveness. "Jack, it's Lillian Moore," she said as soon as he picked up. "Lillian, long time no hear. What can I do for you?" His voice was calm, professional. "I need you to look into someone for me. Adam Thompson. I want everything: background, finances, connections. And I need it fast," she said, the urgency in her voice unmistakable. There was a brief pause. "Adam Thompson. I've heard of him. Big shot philanthropist, right?" "Yes, that's him," Lillian confirmed. "I have reason to believe he's hiding something connected to my daughter." "Emily?" Jack's tone softened. He knew about the pain of her past. "Lillian, are you sure you want to go down this road again?" She swallowed hard. "I need to know, Jack. I saw a girl with him last night. She could be Emily. I'm not saying she is, but I can't shake the feeling." Another pause, then Jack sighed. "All right, I'll start digging. But you need to be prepared, Lillian. We might not find what you're hoping for." "I know," she whispered, her throat tight, "but I have to try." Hanging up, Lillian felt a mixture of fear and hope. She had done everything to move on from the agony of Emily's disappearance, but now, all those wounds were being reopened. As the hours passed, she tried to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting back to Stella. What if this really was her chance to reunite with her daughter? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Later that day, Lillian found herself driving to the neighborhood where Adam Thompson lived. She wasn't sure what she hoped to accomplish, maybe just to see Stella again, to convince herself that this obsession was based on something real. She parked a few houses down from his impressive estate and watched, her heart pounding with a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety. The front gate was tall and imposing, the kind that screamed, "Keep out." Lillian knew she couldn't just walk up and knock on the door. Instead, she decided to observe, hoping to catch a glimpse of Stella, to confirm that she wasn't imagining the resemblance. As the sun began to set, she spotted movement near the gate. Her breath caught in her throat as Stella emerged, accompanied by a woman who looked like a nanny. Stella's laughter drifted through the air, and Lillian felt a pang of longing so intense it was almost physical. She couldn't just sit there any longer. Lillian got out of the car and walked towards the estate, her heart racing. She had no plan, no idea what she would say or do, but she knew she had to get closer. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying over the distance. The nanny turned, her expression cautious. Stella glanced at Lillian, her eyes widening slightly with recognition. "I'm sorry to bother you," Lillian said, trying to keep her tone light, casual. I saw you at the event last night. I'm Lillian Moore." Stella smiled politely, but there was confusion in her eyes. "Yes, I remember. My father introduced us. It's nice to see you again, Ms. Moore." Lillian's heart ached at the sound of her voice, so familiar and yet so foreign. "I just wanted to say hello. Your father mentioned you're interested in architecture. I'd love to talk more about it if you have time." The nanny stepped forward, her body language protective. "Ms. Moore, if you don't mind, Stella has a busy schedule. Perhaps another time." Lillian nodded, her throat tight. "Of course, I didn't mean to intrude. It's just, I was very impressed with how poised you were last night, Stella. You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago." Stella's smile faltered slightly, a flicker of something passing through her eyes. "Thank you, that's very kind of you." There was an awkward silence. Then the nanny gently guided Stella back towards the gate. Lillian stood there, watching them disappear inside, feeling the sting of tears welling up. She had been so close, yet still felt miles away from the answers she desperately needed. She turned back to her car, her thoughts racing. She needed a different approach, something less direct but more effective. She couldn't afford to scare Stella or raise Adam's suspicions. As she drove away, she felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. This wasn't going to be easy, and it was only going to get more complicated the deeper she dug. That night, as she lay awake in bed, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Jack. "Found something? Call me tomorrow." Lillian's heart skipped a beat. Whatever Jack had uncovered could change everything. She knew there was no turning back now. Whatever the truth was, she had to face it, even if it shattered her all over again. With a trembling hand, she placed the phone back on her nightstand, her thoughts a tangled mess of hope and fear. Tomorrow, she would take the next step, armed with whatever Jack had discovered. Because if Stella was Emily, Lillian needed to be ready to fight for her, no matter the cost. And deep down, beneath the fear and uncertainty, a small, fierce flame of determination began to burn. She had lost her daughter once. She would not lose her again. Lillian's hands trembled as she dialed Jack's number the next morning. The anticipation was unbearable, a volatile mix of fear and hope swirling in her chest. She had spent the night tossing and turning, imagining every possible outcome. What if Jack found something that confirmed her fears? What if he didn't find anything at all? Either way, she knew her life was about to change. "Lillian, it's Jack," he answered, his tone serious. "I've got some information, but I'm not sure you're going to like it." Her heart skipped a beat. "Just tell me, Jack. I need to know." "All right," he sighed. "Adam Thompson's past is murkier than it seems. Officially, he doesn't exist before 10 years ago. No records, no trace of him anywhere. It's like he appeared out of nowhere." Lillian frowned, the familiar sense of unease tightening in her chest. "That's not possible. There has to be something. Everyone has a past." "That's what I thought," Jack said. "So, I dug deeper. Turns out, before he became Adam Thompson, he went by a different name, Evan Reed." "Evan Reed?" she repeated, trying to recall if she had ever heard that name. It didn't ring any bells. "Who is he?" Evan Reed was involved in a pretty messy custody battle years ago, back in Chicago. His wife, Stella's biological mother, Emily Reed, died in a car accident. There were rumors that he was abusive, controlling. Social services got involved, and he lost custody of Stella. But before the courts could finalize anything, he disappeared with her. Lillian's heart hammered in her chest. "Are you saying he kidnapped her?" Jack hesitated. "That's one way to put it. Technically, he was still her legal guardian at the time, but he took her and vanished. No one could find them. He reappeared years later as Adam Thompson, with Stella by his side. He built his fortune through some savvy investments, changed their identities, and no one questioned it." Lillian felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. If what Jack was saying was true, then Stella's entire life had been built on a lie. And if she was Emily, her Emily, then Lillian had been searching for her daughter while she was right there, growing up under the care of the man who took her. I don't understand, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Why didn't anyone connect the dots? How could he just get away with it? Money and power, Jack replied simply. He kept a low profile, made the right connections, and people forgot. Most don't even remember Evan Reed or the case. And for those who do, Adam Thompson is untouchable. He's a different man, at least on paper. Lillian sat back, trying to process it all. So, what do I do now? That's up to you, Lillian, Jack said gently. You have to decide if you're going to pursue this. Confronting him won't be easy, and if Stella doesn't know the truth, it could be traumatic for her. Tears blurred her vision. She had dreamt of finding Emily for so long. But now, faced with the reality, she felt paralyzed. What if confronting Adam shattered Stella's world? What if it pushed her away forever? I can't just do nothing, Jack, she whispered, wiping her eyes. She's my daughter. I have to try. I figured you'd say that, Jack replied, his tone softening. I'm here to help, whatever you need. But be careful, Lillian. Adam, or Evan, whatever he calls himself, he's dangerous. He won't give her up easily. After hanging up, Lillian felt a surge of determination. She couldn't afford to let fear hold her back. She had already lost so much time, and now she had to act. She needed to find a way to approach Stella without alerting Adam, a way to connect with her, to see if there was any truth in Jack's revelations. That afternoon, she sat in her car outside the community center where she had learned Stella volunteered. It was a small, cozy place dedicated to helping at-risk youth and families. Lillian's heart ached with pride and sorrow as she watched Stella through the window, her gentle smile as she spoke with a group of children. She was kind, compassionate, everything Lillian had ever imagined her daughter would be. Taking a deep breath, she got out of the car and walked towards the entrance. She had no clear plan, only a desperate need to see Stella up close, to talk to her without Adam hovering over them. As she stepped inside, the warmth and noise enveloped her. Children's laughter, volunteers chatting, the smell of freshly baked cookies wafting from the kitchen. She spotted Stella at the far end of the room, organizing art supplies with a few kids around her. Lillian's heart raced as she approached, her palms sweaty. "Hi there," she said softly, forcing a smile as she reached the table. "I'm Lillian. I wanted to see if you needed any help." Stella looked up, her eyes widening slightly with surprise. "Ms. Moore? What are you doing here?" Lillian's smile faltered. "Oh, I volunteer here sometimes. I'm taking a break from work and thought I'd stop by." Stella seemed skeptical but nodded, her eyes flicking to the children before returning to Lillian. "That's great. The kids always appreciate more help." Lillian's heart soared at the opportunity to stay close. "I could help with the art projects. I'm pretty good with a paintbrush." Stella smiled, and for a moment, Lillian saw a glimpse of the little girl she had lost so long ago. "Sure, that'd be wonderful." They spent the next hour working side by side, painting and laughing with the children. Lillian couldn't help but steal glances at Stella, her heart swelling with love and longing. She wanted to reach out, to tell her everything, but she knew she had to wait, to be careful. As they cleaned up, Stella turned to her, a curious look in her eyes. "You don't seem like the kind of person who has much free time, Ms. Moore. Why do you volunteer?" Lillian hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I lost someone very dear to me a long time ago, a child, and I guess I just wanted to be around kids, to feel like I was giving back, somehow." Stella's expression softened. "I'm so sorry. That must have been really hard." "It was," Lillian said, her voice thick with emotion. "But being here, helping kids like you do, it helps. More than you can imagine." Stella looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in her eyes. Then, she nodded. "I'm glad you're here, Ms. Moore. The kids seem to really like you." Lillian's heart clenched. This wasn't the confession she longed to make, but it was a start, a small connection forged in truth. She had to believe that, given time, she would find a way to tell Stella who she really was. As she left the center that evening, Lillian felt a renewed sense of hope. She had spent years believing she would never see her daughter again, and now, she was here, within reach. It was a miracle she hadn't dared to pray for, and she wouldn't squander it. But as she drove away, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Evan, was still an unknown factor. How far would he go to protect his secret? And what would happen when the truth finally came to light? Lillian knew she was on borrowed time. Every moment she spent with Stella brought her closer to the answers she sought, but also closer to a confrontation that could destroy them all. Lillian's heart raced as she pulled up to Adam's estate. The manicured hedges and imposing iron gates only added to the sense of unease building in her chest. She knew this was a reckless move, showing up unannounced at his home. But the past few days had been unbearable. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Her interaction with Stella at the community center had been bittersweet. For a few precious hours, Lillian had seen a glimpse of the young woman her daughter had become. But every moment was tainted by the knowledge that this fragile connection was built on lies. Lillian's frustration and desperation had only grown, and now, standing outside Adam's house, she knew she was on the edge of something dangerous. She pressed the intercom button, her hand trembling slightly. After a tense pause, a crisp voice crackled through the speaker. "Yes? Who is this?" "Lillian Moore," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm here to see Adam Thompson." There was a long silence, and Lillian's nerves stretched taut. She was about to press the button again when the gate clicked and began to open. Taking a deep breath, she drove up the winding driveway, her heart pounding with every turn of the wheels. The house loomed ahead, a testament to Adam's wealth and influence. Lillian parked and stepped out, smoothing her dress as she approached the front door. It opened before she could knock, and there stood Adam, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Moore," he greeted, his tone polite but cool. "This is unexpected." Lillian forced a smile, though her heart was racing. "I'm sorry to drop by like this, but I thought we could talk privately." Adam's eyes narrowed slightly, but he stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Of course. Please come in." The interior of the house was just as impressive as the exterior, filled with tasteful art and elegant furniture. But to Lillian, it felt sterile, almost oppressive. She followed Adam into a spacious sitting room, where he motioned for her to take a seat. "Can I offer you something to drink?" he asked, his voice smooth. "No, thank you," she replied, sitting down and clasping her hands tightly in her lap. "I won't take much of your time. I need to talk to you about Stella." Adam's expression didn't change, but Lillian noticed the way his shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. "What about Stella?" Lillian took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I met her at the community center. She's a remarkable young woman, but I can't help feeling that there's something you're not telling her. Something she deserves to know." Adam's eyes turned cold, a dangerous glint in them. "I'm not sure I follow. What exactly are you suggesting, Ms. Moore?" Her heart hammered in her chest, but she pressed on. "I know about your past, Adam. Or should I say, Evan? I know who you really are and what you did. Stella deserves to know the truth." The air between them crackled with tension. Adam's calm demeanor cracked, his jaw tightening. "You're overstepping, Lillian. Whatever you think you know, it doesn't concern you." "It concerns me if she's my daughter." Lillian's voice broke, the words spilling out before she could stop them. The silence that followed was suffocating. She saw the shock flash across Adam's face, followed by something darker, more dangerous. "You're delusional," he said quietly, his voice dripping with contempt. "Stella is my daughter. You have no right to come here and make wild accusations." "I'm not accusing, I'm stating a fact," Lillian countered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I lost my daughter, Emily, 20 years ago. She was taken from me, and I've been looking for her ever since. When I saw Stella, I knew, deep down, I knew it was her. And then Jack, my investigator, found out about your past, about how you disappeared with her. You can't deny this, Adam. I won't let you." Adam's eyes blazed with anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You think you can just waltz in here and claim my daughter as yours because of some absurd fantasy? It's not a fantasy." Lillian's voice cracked, the desperation pouring out. "She's my daughter. I carried her. I held her in my arms, and I've spent every day of the last 20 years wondering where she is, if she's safe, if she's happy. You took that from me. Adam stood abruptly, his fists clenched at his sides. I saved her. You think you know what happened, but you don't. You have no idea what kind of life she would have had, what kind of danger she was in. Lillian's heart lurched. What do you mean? What danger? Adam paced, his movements agitated, his face contorted with a mix of fury and something else, something that almost looked like pain. You think I just took her for no reason? Her mother was unstable. She was in a car accident, yes, but that wasn't the whole story. She was using drugs, spiraling out of control. I had to get Stella away from all of that. I had to protect her. Lillian's mind reeled, struggling to process his words. But why not get help? Why not go through the courts? I tried, he snapped, his voice rising. But no one listened. They saw me as the bad guy, the controlling husband. They would have taken her away from me, given her to foster care, or worse, back to her mother's family. I couldn't let that happen. The room seemed to close in around Lillian. She could see the truth in his eyes, the twisted justification that had driven him to do what he did. But it didn't change the fact that he had stolen her daughter's life, robbed her of the chance to be a mother. Whatever your reasons, she said, her voice trembling, you took her. You took my Emily. And now, you're keeping her from knowing the truth. Adam stared at her, his eyes hard. Stella doesn't need to know. She's happy. She's safe. Why would you want to destroy that? Because she deserves to know who she is, Lillian said, tears streaming down her face. She deserves the chance to decide for herself. They stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Lillian's heart ached, the pain of 2 decades of loss and longing threatening to overwhelm her. But she held her ground, refusing to back down. You can't keep this from her forever, she whispered. Sooner or later, she'll find out. Adam's expression shifted, a flicker of something like resignation crossing his features. Maybe, but I'll do everything I can to protect her from that pain, even if it means protecting her from you. Lillian's heart shattered at his words, but she refused to give in to despair. She would find a way to reach Stella, to tell her the truth. No matter how long it took, she would make sure her daughter knew she was loved, that she had never been forgotten. Then I guess we'll see, won't we? She said softly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. I'm not going anywhere, Adam. I won't give up on her. With that, she turned and walked out, her legs shaking but her resolve stronger than ever. She knew this was just the beginning of a long, painful fight. But for the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose, a clarity that had been missing for so long. As she drove away from Adam's house, Lillian's mind raced with possibilities. She needed to be smart, to find a way to tell Stella the truth without causing her more harm. And she knew she couldn't do it alone. She would need allies, people who could help her break through the wall Adam had built around her daughter. But one thing was certain, she wouldn't stop. Not until she had her daughter back. Not until Emily, no, Stella, knew the truth about who she was and where she came from. And no matter what Adam did, no matter how hard he tried to keep them apart, Lillian would not be silenced. Because a mother's love, once awakened, was a force that could not be contained. Lillian's confrontation with Adam lingered in her mind for days, his words echoing in her thoughts as she tried to make sense of everything. The guilt, the anger, the heartbreak. Each emotion swirled around her, fighting for dominance. But one thing remained clear. She couldn't let this go. Stella had a right to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. She spent the next week meticulously planning her approach. Adam had made it clear that he would do everything in his power to protect his secret. That meant she needed to find a way to reach Stella without tipping him off. She needed someone on the inside, someone who could help her get closer to Stella without raising suspicion. Lillian thought back to the community center. There had been a woman there, a volunteer coordinator named Laura, who seemed to know Stella well. They had exchanged a few words the day Lillian visited, and Laura had mentioned how much she admired Stella's dedication. It was a long shot, but Lillian decided to reach out to her. Maybe Laura could be the key to bridging the gap between her and her daughter. She found Laura's contact information online and called her, keeping her voice steady despite the nerves that fluttered in her chest. Hello, Laura. It's Lillian Moore. We met at the community center last week. There was a brief pause, then Laura's warm voice came through the line. Oh, Ms. Moore. Yes, of course, I remember you. How can I help? I wanted to talk to you about Stella, Lillian began carefully. I'm worried about her. I think there are things she doesn't know, things she should know. Laura hesitated, the warmth in her tone replaced by cautious concern. What kind of things? Lillian took a deep breath. She couldn't reveal too much, not yet. I believe she might be in a situation where she's being kept from the truth about her family. I'm trying to help her, but I need someone close to her who can be there, who can support her if things get difficult. There was silence on the other end, and Lillian's heart pounded as she waited for Laura's response. I don't know, Ms. Moore, Laura finally said, her voice wary. I care about Stella a lot, but I don't want to do anything that could hurt her. She's been through enough. I understand, Lillian said softly, her throat tight. I don't want to hurt her either. But if I'm right, Stella deserves to know the truth. And she's going to need people around her who can help her through it. There was another pause, then Laura sighed. Okay, Ms. Moore, I'm willing to listen, but I'm not promising anything. Lillian's heart leapt with hope. Thank you, Laura. That's all I ask. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe later that evening. Lillian arrived early, her nerves on edge. She had rehearsed what she would say 100 times, but the fear of saying too much, or not enough, gnawed at her. When Laura arrived, Lillian forced a smile, but it felt fragile, as if it could crack under the weight of everything she was holding back. Thank you for coming, she said, gesturing for Laura to sit. Laura nodded, her expression serious. You sounded worried. What's going on? Lillian took a deep breath, then began to speak, choosing her words carefully. She told Laura about Emily, about the pain of losing her, about how she had spent years searching, never giving up hope. She explained how she had seen Stella at the event and felt an undeniable connection, how she had hired a private investigator and discovered Adam's past. I know it sounds unbelievable, Lillian said, her voice trembling, but I truly believe that Stella is my daughter. And Adam, he's been lying to her, keeping her from her real family. Laura's eyes widened, shock and confusion mingling in her gaze. That's a lot to take in. Are you sure, Ms. Moore? I mean, what if you're wrong? Lillian's heart clenched. I know it's a risk, but I can't just walk away, not after everything I've learned. Stella deserves to know who she is, to know the truth about her past. Laura looked down, her expression conflicted. Stella is strong, but she's also sensitive. She doesn't talk much about her childhood, but I can tell there's a lot of pain there. If what you're saying is true, this could shatter her. I know, Lillian whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. But living a lie is just as damaging. I don't want to take her away from Adam. I just want her to have the choice, to know where she came from. Laura was silent for a long moment, then she nodded slowly. All right, I'll try to talk to her, see if I can get a sense of what she knows, or what she suspects. But I can't promise she'll believe me, or that she'll want to meet you. That's all I can ask, Lillian said, relief flooding through her. Thank you, Laura. I can't tell you what this means to me. After they finished their coffee, Lillian left the cafe with a sense of cautious hope. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. If Laura could help her reach Stella, maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to tell her the truth without Adam interfering. Over the next few days, Lillian waited anxiously for news. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind was constantly drifting, her thoughts consumed by Stella. She imagined a dozen different scenarios, from Stella rejecting her to a tearful reunion. The uncertainty was torture. Then, one afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Laura. Talk to Stella. She's confused but curious. Wants to meet. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., at the park behind the community center. Lillian's heart soared and then plummeted in equal measure. This was it, the moment she had been both longing for and dreading. Stella wanted to meet. It was more than she had dared hope for, but it also meant that everything was about to change. The next day, Lillian arrived at the park early, her hands clammy and her stomach in knots. She chose a secluded spot near a grove of trees, away from the playground and the busy paths. She needed this to be private, needed Stella to feel safe. Every minute felt like an hour as she waited, her eyes scanning the park for any sign of her daughter. Finally, she saw her. Stella, walking hesitantly down the path, her eyes searching. Lillian stood, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. She took a few steps forward, her throat tight, her vision blurring with unshed tears. "Stella," she called softly, her voice breaking. Stella stopped, her eyes locking onto Lillian's. For a moment, they just stood there, staring at each other. Then Stella took a deep breath and walked closer, her expression guarded but curious. "Ms. Moore," she said quietly, "Laura said you wanted to talk to me. About my past." Lillian nodded, her heart aching with the need to reach out, to pull Stella into her arms and never let go. But she forced herself to stay still, to let Stella set the pace. "Yes, I know this is overwhelming, and I'm so sorry to spring this on you. But I know that you're my daughter. You were taken from me when you were a baby, and I've been searching for you ever since." Stella's eyes widened, a flicker of something like fear crossing her face. I don't understand. My father." "Adam isn't your real father," Lillian interrupted gently. "He took you. He changed your name, made you believe you were his. But you're my Emily. I know this is a lot to take in, but it's the truth." Stella took a step back, shaking her head. "No, that's crazy. My father, he's always been there for me. He's the only family I've ever known." "I'm not trying to take him away from you," Lillian said, her voice desperate. "I just want you to know who you are, where you come from. I want you to have the choice to know me, to know the truth." Stella's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, her hands trembling. "This is too much. I don't know what to think." Lillian's heart broke at the sight of her daughter's pain. "I'm so sorry, Stella. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep this from you. I just need you to know that I've always loved you, that I never stopped looking for you." Stella wiped at her eyes, her breath hitching. "I don't know what to believe. How do I know you're not just making this up?" Lillian reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn photo. It was of her and Emily, taken just a few months before she was taken. She handed it to Stella, her hands shaking. "This is you, when you were a baby," she said softly. "I've kept this with me every day since you were gone." Stella stared at the photo, her eyes wide, her face pale. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. Then she looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't he tell me? Why did he lie?" Lillian stepped closer, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I'm here now, and I'll answer any questions you have. I'll tell you everything, I promise." Stella looked at her, her eyes full of pain and confusion. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay, I want to know." Lillian's heart swelled with hope and love and a fierce determination. This was only the beginning, but it was a beginning. She had found her daughter, and now, she would do whatever it took to make up for lost time. As they sat down on the park bench and began to talk, Lillian knew that this journey was far from over. There would be more pain, more challenges ahead. But she also knew that she would face it all, because Stella was worth it. Because love, once found, was a force that nothing could break. Enjoying the video? Subscribe to our channel to receive more interesting content. Click the subscribe button and stay updated with the latest news. The days following their first meeting in the park were a whirlwind of emotions for Lillian. She could hardly believe it. After all these years, she had finally spoken to her daughter. And not just spoken, but shared the truth she had been carrying for so long. But as elated as she felt, the road ahead was still uncertain. Stella was overwhelmed, confused, and rightfully so. Lillian knew she had to tread carefully. That first conversation had been intense, full of tears and tentative questions. Stella had wanted to know everything. What had happened to her mother, why Lillian had lost her, how Adam had come into the picture. Lillian had answered as best as she could, her heart aching with every word. She had explained the day Emily had been taken, the endless search that had led nowhere, and the hope that had never quite died. Stella had listened, silent and wide-eyed, her face a mask of shock and pain. When she had finally spoken, her voice had been barely more than a whisper. "I always knew something was off," she had said, her hands twisting in her lap. "There were things that didn't add up, but I thought maybe it was just me, that I was imagining it. Now, I don't know what to think." Lillian had wanted to reach out, to hold her, but she knew she couldn't push too hard. Stella needed time, space to process this new reality. So, she had let her go that evening, watching as Stella walked away, her shoulders hunched and her steps unsteady. It had taken every ounce of strength Lillian had not to run after her, to beg her to stay. But she knew this was something Stella had to come to terms with on her own. The next few days were agonizingly quiet. Lillian checked her phone constantly, hoping for a message, a sign that Stella was willing to keep the lines of communication open. When the silence stretched into the third day, Lillian feared she had pushed too hard, that she had lost her daughter all over again. Then, finally, her phone buzzed with a text. It was a short message, just a few words that sent a wave of relief crashing over her. "Can we meet again? I have more questions." Lillian's hands shook as she typed her response, her heart lifting. "Of course. Anytime you want." They arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown, a neutral place where they could talk without drawing too much attention. Lillian arrived early, as always, her nerves on edge. She ordered tea, trying to calm herself, but every time the door opened, her heart leapt. When Stella finally walked in, Lillian had to resist the urge to rush to her. Instead, she forced herself to stay seated, her eyes scanning Stella's face for any sign of how she was feeling. Stella looked tired, her eyes shadowed, but there was a determination in her expression that gave Lillian hope. "Hi," Stella said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. I just needed time to think." "That's okay," Lillian said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Take all the time you need. I'm just so glad you're here." Stella nodded, her eyes darting around the cafe as if she were looking for an escape route. "I don't know what to do, Ms. Moore. I mean, Lillian," she corrected herself, the name sounding foreign on her tongue. "I still can't wrap my head around it. Everything I thought I knew, it's all a lie." "I know," Lillian whispered, her heart aching at the pain in Stella's eyes. "But I'm here now, and I want to help you make sense of all this. You don't have to go through it alone." Stella's gaze softened, and she looked down, fiddling with the sleeve of her jacket. "I don't even know where to start. I keep thinking about all the times I felt like something was wrong, but I pushed it away. And now, I'm just angry. Angry at him for lying to me, for taking away my chance to know you." Lillian reached out tentatively, her hand hovering over Stella's. "You have every right to be angry. What he did, it wasn't fair to you. But you're not alone in this. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Stella looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I want to believe that. I really do. But I'm scared, Lillian. Scared of what happens if I confront him, if I tell him I know. What if he tries to take me away again?" Lillian's heart clenched. "He can't do that. You're an adult now. He has no power over you anymore." "But he still controls everything else in my life," Stella said bitterly. "My education, my friends, even my job. He has so much influence, and I don't know what he'll do if I tell him I want to leave." Lillian swallowed hard, struggling to keep her own emotions in check. "Then we'll be careful. We'll take it one step at a time. I won't let him hurt you, Stella. I promise." Stella's eyes searched hers, and for a moment, Lillian saw a flicker of trust, of hope. "I don't know if I'm ready to confront him yet, but I do want to know more about you, about my real family. Can we start there?" Lillian's heart soared. "Of course. I'll tell you anything you want to know." They spent the next few hours talking, Lillian sharing stories about her own life, about the family Stella never knew she had. She told her about her grandparents, about the summers they used to spend at the beach, about the lullabies she used to sing to Emily when she was just a baby. Stella listened, absorbing it all, her eyes filled with a longing that mirrored Lillian's own. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Lillian felt something shift between them, a fragile, tentative connection that was beginning to take root. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And that was more than Lillian had dared hope for. When they finally parted, Stella hugged her, a brief, almost hesitant embrace that left Lillian breathless with joy. "Thank you," Stella murmured, "for telling me all this. I think it helps." Lillian blinked back tears, her voice thick. "I'm so glad. And remember, I'm here whenever you need me. Anytime, for anything." Stella nodded, her smile small but genuine. "I'll see you soon, Lillian." As she watched Stella walk away, Lillian felt a cautious optimism bloom in her chest. This was progress. They were taking small, careful steps, but they were moving forward, together. Stella was starting to trust her, to believe in the possibility of a relationship. And that was everything. But as much as she wanted to savor the moment, Lillian knew they were still on uncertain ground. Adam wouldn't stay in the dark forever. If he found out what Stella knew, what they were planning, he could try to manipulate the situation, to twist things in his favor. Lillian had no illusions about the man she was up against. Adam had built a life on deception, and he wouldn't let go of Stella easily. She would need to be vigilant, to protect Stella from any backlash that might come their way. And that meant staying one step ahead of Adam, no matter what it took. She made a decision that night as she lay awake, her thoughts racing. She needed to find out more about Adam's life now, about the connections and resources he had built. If she could anticipate his moves, she could keep Stella safe. The next morning, she called Jack again. "I need you to keep looking into Adam," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I want to know everything. His business dealings, his associates, his financials, everything." Jack hesitated. "Lillian, are you sure you want to go down this road? Digging into someone like him? It could get messy." "I don't care," Lillian said fiercely. "He's hurt my daughter enough. I need to know what we're up against." "All right," Jack said, his voice resigned. "I'll see what I can find. But be careful, Lillian. This could get dangerous." Lillian's jaw tightened. "I'm not afraid of him. I'm not going to let him control her life anymore." Hanging up, Lillian felt a sense of grim determination settle over her. She had found her daughter, but the battle was far from over. She needed to be strong, to be prepared for whatever Adam might throw their way. Because Stella was counting on her, and Lillian would not let her down. Not this time. Not ever again. Lillian's days blurred into a haze of anxiety and determination. Her thoughts were consumed by Stella, by the fragile connection they were trying to build, and by the dark shadow of Adam lurking behind it all. Every time she and Stella met, Lillian felt a new layer of hope, but it was always tinged with fear. Fear that Adam would find out, that he would somehow turn Stella against her. After their heartfelt conversation at the cafe, Stella had grown more comfortable reaching out. They texted almost daily, brief messages that felt monumental given the years of silence that had preceded them. Each time Lillian's phone buzzed with a notification from Stella, her heart skipped a beat. Their chats were cautious, sometimes awkward, but they were a lifeline, a fragile, delicate thread pulling them closer together. One afternoon, as Lillian was reviewing blueprints for a new project, her phone rang. It was Stella. "Hi," Lillian answered, her voice warm and a bit breathless. She couldn't help it. Hearing Stella's voice was like a balm for her soul. "Hi, Lillian," Stella replied, her tone hesitant. "I was wondering if you're free today. I want to see you." Lillian's heart raced. "Of course, sweetheart. I'm free. Where would you like to meet?" There was a pause on the line. Then Stella said, "Can I come over to your place? I feel like I need to see where you live, get to know more about your life." Lillian felt a surge of emotion, her eyes prickling with tears. "Yes, absolutely. I'd love that. I'll text you the address." After hanging up, Lillian stood in the middle of her office, a thousand thoughts racing through her mind. She looked around at the space that had been her sanctuary for so long, filled with reminders of the life she had built without Emily. She wanted everything to be perfect for Stella, to show her that she was welcome, that she belonged. She rushed around, tidying up, trying to calm her nerves. This was a big step, and she needed to make sure Stella felt comfortable, that she didn't feel overwhelmed. By the time Stella's car pulled up outside, Lillian's heart was pounding with anticipation. She opened the door, her smile wide and genuine. "Hi, come in, please." Stella stepped inside, looking around curiously. "Wow, this place is beautiful," she said, her voice filled with awe. "It's exactly what I imagined for you." Lillian laughed, the sound light and a little shaky. "Thank you. I've put a lot of myself into it over the years." Stella wandered around, her eyes taking in the carefully curated art on the walls, the shelves lined with books, and the family photos that Lillian had never stopped displaying even after Emily was taken. Stella paused in front of one, her gaze lingering on a picture of a much younger Lillian, holding a baby in her arms, her smile radiant with love. "That's you and me, isn't it?" Stella asked softly, her voice tinged with wonder. Lillian moved to stand beside her, her heart swelling. "Yes, that was the day we brought you home from the hospital. You were just a few weeks old." Stella's eyes were shiny with unshed tears as she turned to Lillian. "I don't remember any of it. I wish I did." "It's okay," Lillian said gently, placing a tentative hand on her shoulder. "We have time to make new memories. I want you to feel at home here, to know that this is your place too." Stella nodded, a small, grateful smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you. I'm trying. I really am. It's just hard." "I know," Lillian whispered, her heart aching, "but we'll get through it together." They spent the next few hours talking, sharing stories, and even laughing a little. Lillian showed Stella old photo albums, recounting memories of Emily's early years, and Stella, to Lillian's relief, seemed genuinely interested. It felt surreal, almost like a dream, to have her daughter here, in her home, after so many years of longing and searching. As the afternoon turned into evening, Stella's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression tightening. "It's Adam," she said, her voice strained. "He's asking where I am." Lillian's heart sank, but she forced a calm smile. "Do you need to go?" Stella hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I'll just tell him I'm out with friends. I'm not ready to face him yet. Not after everything I've learned." "Okay," Lillian said softly, relief washing over her. "But if you ever feel ready to talk to him, I'll be there for you, whatever happens." Stella's eyes softened. "Thank you, Lillian. That means a lot." But the tension from the message lingered between them, casting a shadow over the evening. Stella grew quieter, more withdrawn, and Lillian could see the conflict in her eyes. The war between the loyalty she felt for Adam and the growing connection she was building with Lillian. When it was time for Stella to leave, Lillian walked her to the door, her heart heavy with the knowledge that their time together was always too short. "Please, be careful," Lillian said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't trust Adam, not with what he's done. Promise me you'll look out for yourself." Stella nodded, her eyes earnest. "I will. I'm scared of what he'll do when he finds out." "We'll face it together," Lillian promised, her hand squeezing Stella's. "You're not alone in this. You never will be." Stella hugged her then, a fierce, desperate embrace that made Lillian's heart break and soar at the same time. She held her daughter tightly, feeling the fragile bond between them solidify just a little bit more. "I'll see you soon," Stella whispered before stepping back. "Anytime," Lillian said, watching her walk to her car, her heart full and aching all at once. As Stella drove away, Lillian stood on the porch, the evening air cool against her skin. She knew they were on borrowed time. Every day that Stella didn't confront Adam, every day that she kept their meetings a secret, the tension grew. Adam would find out eventually, and when he did, there was no telling how he would react. That night, Lillian's phone rang again. It was Jack. "I've got something," he said, his voice urgent. "Adam's been making some moves, unusual financial transactions, calls to some shady contacts. I think he's preparing for something." Lillian's heart clenched with fear. "What do you mean? What is he planning?" "I'm not sure yet," Jack admitted, "but it looks like he's liquidating assets, consolidating funds. It's like he's getting ready to disappear." A cold chill ran down Lillian's spine. "He's going to run. He's going to take her away again." "That's what it looks like," Jack said grimly. "You need to act fast, Lillian. If he thinks Stella knows the truth, he won't stick around." Panic gripped Lillian's heart. She had come so close to losing Stella once. She couldn't let it happen again. She needed to warn Stella, to make sure she understood the danger. "Can you keep an eye on him?" she asked Jack, her voice shaking. "If he makes any sudden moves, I need to know." "Of course," Jack said. "But you need to be careful too, Lillian. Don't do anything rash." Lillian hung up, her mind racing. She couldn't let Adam take Stella away. Not again. She had to protect her, had to make her see what kind of man he really was. The next day, she arranged to meet Stella again, this time at a quiet park on the outskirts of the city. Stella arrived looking nervous, her eyes darting around as if she expected Adam to appear at any moment. "What's going on?" she asked as she sat down beside Lillian on a secluded bench. "You sounded worried on the phone." Lillian took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Stella, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be hard to hear, but it's important." Stella's face paled, her hands twisting in her lap. "What is it?" "Adam knows something's wrong," Lillian said gently. "He's making plans, moving money around. I think he's preparing to run, to take you with him." Stella's eyes widened in shock. "No, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't just leave." "Yes, he would," Lillian said, her voice fierce. "He's done it before, and he'll do it again. He's desperate, Stella. He'll do whatever it takes to keep you away from the truth, from me." Tears welled in Stella's eyes, and she looked away, her face crumpling with pain. Why would he do this? Why can't he just be honest? "Because he's afraid," Lillian said softly. "Afraid of losing you. But you deserve to make your own choices, to live your own life. Don't let him take that away from you." Stella was silent for a long moment, her breath hitching. Then she turned back to Lillian, her expression resolute. "What do we do?" Lillian felt a surge of hope and fear. "We have to be careful, plan our next steps. You can't let him know that you're onto him, not until we have a way to keep you safe." Stella nodded slowly, her eyes dark with determination. "I won't let him take me. I won't let him control my life anymore." Lillian reached out, taking Stella's hand in hers, her heart swelling with pride and love. "We'll figure this out together. I promise." As they sat there, holding hands, Lillian knew they were standing on the edge of a precipice. One wrong move, and they could lose everything. But for the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose, a fierce resolve burning in her chest. She had found her daughter, and she would fight for her, no matter what it took. And this time, she wouldn't let Adam or anyone else tear them apart. Because love, once found, was a force that nothing could break. And Lillian would do whatever it took to protect that love, to protect her family. The days that followed were a blur of planning and anxiety. Lillian and Stella were walking on a razor's edge, trying to balance their fragile relationship while keeping Adam in the dark. Each meeting was tense, every conversation laden with the fear of discovery. Lillian could see the toll it was taking on Stella. The sleepless nights, the nervous glances over her shoulder, the constant worry that Adam would sense something was wrong. Lillian knew they were running out of time. Adam's suspicious behavior was escalating. He was growing more controlling, more insistent on knowing where Stella was at all times. The pressure was mounting, and they needed to make a move before it was too late. One evening, as Lillian sat alone in her living room, her phone buzzed with a call from Jack. Her heart skipped a beat as she answered. "Lillian, it's Jack. I've been keeping an eye on Adam like you asked, and something's up. He's booked flights under an alias to a remote location in South America. They leave tomorrow." Lillian's blood ran cold. "He's planning to leave? With Stella?" "It looks that way. He's moving fast, liquidating everything. I think he's scared. He knows something's not right." Lillian's hand tightened around her phone, her mind racing. "We need to stop him. He can't just take her and disappear again." Jack's voice was calm but firm. "You need to get to Stella. Tell her what's happening. If she's with you, he can't take her. But be careful, Lillian. Adam's desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things." Hanging up, Lillian felt a surge of determination. She grabbed her keys and rushed out the door, her thoughts a chaotic mix of fear and resolve. She needed to get to Stella, to warn her, to protect her. She couldn't lose her again. Not now. Not when they had come so far. She drove to Stella's apartment, her hands trembling on the wheel. She prayed that Stella would be there, that she hadn't already gone with Adam. When she arrived, She parked haphazardly and ran to the door, pounding on it with frantic urgency. "Stella, it's Lillian. Please, open the door." There was a long, terrifying pause. Then the door opened a crack, and Stella's pale, tear-streaked face appeared. "Lillian, what's going on?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Why are you here?" "We need to leave right now," Lillian said urgently. "Adam's planning to take you away. He's booked flights out of the country. We need to get somewhere safe, somewhere he can't find you." Stella's eyes widened, fear and confusion warring on her face. "What? No, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't just leave. He's done it before, and he'll do it again," Lillian insisted, her voice desperate. "Please, Stella, you have to trust me." Stella hesitated, her hands trembling as she clutched the door. "But where would we go? What if he finds us?" "We'll figure it out together," Lillian said, reaching out to take her hand. "But we need to go now." For a moment, Stella looked as though she might refuse, might close the door and shut Lillian out. Then, with a trembling breath, she nodded. "Okay, I'll go with you." Relief flooded through Lillian, and she squeezed Stella's hand. "Pack a bag, just the essentials. We don't have much time." As Stella hurried to gather her things, Lillian stood by the door, her heart pounding. She kept glancing at the hallway, half expecting Adam to appear at any moment. When Stella re-emerged, a small duffel bag slung over her shoulder, Lillian felt a surge of protectiveness. She would keep her daughter safe, no matter what. They left the apartment and got into Lillian's car, driving away with a sense of urgency that left them both breathless. Lillian didn't have a clear destination in mind, just somewhere far enough from Adam's reach. She drove towards the outskirts of the city, her mind racing with plans and contingencies. "Lillian," Stella said quietly, breaking the tense silence, "what if he comes after us? What if he tries to hurt you?" Lillian glanced at her, her heart aching at the fear in Stella's voice. "We won't let him. We'll stay ahead of him, stay safe. I promise." Stella nodded, but her eyes were distant, her mind clearly elsewhere. Lillian wished she could reach out, could offer some comfort, but she knew words would only go so far. All she could do was keep driving, keep moving, until they found a place where Adam couldn't reach them. They ended up at a small, nondescript motel on the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was safe, anonymous. Lillian paid for the room in cash, and they slipped inside, locking the door behind them. The room was small and a bit shabby, but it felt like a sanctuary. They sat on the bed, the silence between them heavy. Lillian wanted to reach out, to hold Stella and tell her everything would be okay, but she knew that wasn't what Stella needed right now. She needed time, space to process everything. "Thank you," Stella whispered after a long pause, her voice trembling, "for coming to get me. I didn't know what to do." Lillian's heart swelled with love and pain. "I'll always come for you, Stella, no matter what." They fell asleep side by side, Lillian holding Stella's hand, a fierce protectiveness burning in her chest. This wasn't over, far from it, but at least for tonight, they were safe. And for now, that was enough. The next morning, Lillian woke with a start, her heart pounding. For a moment, she didn't know where she was, the unfamiliar motel room disorienting in the early morning light. Then she felt Stella's hand in hers and remembered everything. Relief washed over her, but it was fleeting. Today, they needed a plan. A way to keep Adam from taking Stella away again. Stella stirred beside her, blinking up at the ceiling. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Lillian took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "We need to talk to the authorities. Tell them what Adam's planning, what he's done. It's the only way to keep you safe." Stella's eyes widened in fear. "But what if they don't believe us? What if he finds us before we can explain everything?" "We'll make them believe us," Lillian said firmly. "We have evidence, Jack's information, the records of his past. We can prove what he's done." Stella was silent for a long moment, then she nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll do it. I don't want to live like this anymore, Lillian. I want to be free." Lillian's heart ached at the pain in Stella's voice. "You will be, sweetheart. I promise. We'll get through this." They gathered their things and left the motel, heading towards the nearest police station. Lillian's hands were shaking as she drove, her mind racing with fears and what-ifs. But she knew this was their best chance. They needed to get to the authorities before Adam realized they were gone. As they pulled into the parking lot, Lillian's phone buzzed. It was Jack. "Lillian, where are you?" His voice was tense, urgent. "We're at the police station," Lillian said quickly. "We're going to report everything." "Good," Jack said, relief evident in his tone. "I've got more information. Adam's been in contact with some pretty dangerous people. I think he's trying to cover his tracks. You need to be careful." Lillian's blood ran cold. "We will." "Thank you, Jack." She hung up and turned to Stella, her heart pounding. "We need to go inside. Tell them everything. Are you ready?" Stella took a deep breath, her face pale but determined. "Yes, let's do it." They walked into the police station, Lillian's heart in her throat. She felt exposed, vulnerable, but she knew they had no other choice. They needed to be somewhere public, somewhere safe. Approaching the desk, Lillian cleared her throat. "We need to speak to someone about an urgent matter. It's about a kidnapping." The officer behind the desk looked up, her expression professional but curious. "Can you give me some more details?" Lillian glanced at Stella, then back at the officer. "It's complicated, but it involves my daughter. She was taken from me years ago, and now the man who took her is planning to run. We need help." The officer's eyes widened slightly, and she gestured for them to follow her. "Let's go to a private room. You can tell me everything there." As they were led to a small interview room, Lillian felt a sense of both dread and relief. They were doing the right thing, but the fear of what Adam might do still loomed over her. They sat down, and the officer, whose name tag read Officer Ramirez, took a seat across from them. "Okay, start from the beginning," she said gently. "Tell me what's going on." Lillian took a deep breath and began to speak, laying out everything. How Emily had been taken, how she had found Stella, how Adam had manipulated and lied to them both. Stella chimed in, her voice trembling but steady as she recounted her life with Adam, the inconsistencies, the growing sense that something was wrong. Officer Ramirez listened intently, her face serious. When they finished, she leaned back, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "This is a lot to process," she said slowly, "but it sounds like you have a strong case. Do you have any proof of what you're saying?" Lillian nodded, pulling out the documents Jack had sent her, the records of Adam's alias, the evidence of his past. Officer Ramirez looked through them, her expression growing more concerned with each page. "This is compelling," she said finally. "I'm going to get my supervisor. We need to take this seriously." As she left the room, Lillian turned to Stella, reaching for her hand. "We're doing the right thing. It's going to be okay." Stella nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "I just want this to be over, Lillian. I just want to be free." "I know," Lillian whispered, her heart breaking. "We're almost there." Minutes later, Officer Ramirez returned with a man in plain clothes, his expression serious but kind. He introduced himself as Detective Harris and asked them to go through everything again. As Lillian and Stella recounted their story, Lillian felt the weight of it all. The years of pain, the fear, the hope that had kept her going. When they finished, Detective Harris nodded. "We'll put out a bolo on Adam Thompson or Evan Reed, as you've indicated. We'll also arrange for a protection detail for you both. If he's as dangerous as you say, we need to be ready." Lillian felt a surge of relief. They were finally being heard, finally being believed. "Thank you, Detective. I can't tell you what this means to us." He smiled, a reassuring gesture. "We'll do everything we can to keep you safe." As they were led to a safe house, Lillian felt a sense of calm settle over her for the first time in days. They were being protected, watched over. Adam couldn't get to them here. But even as she tried to relax, a part of her couldn't let go of the fear. Adam was unpredictable, desperate. She knew he wouldn't go quietly, and that terrified her. The next 24 hours were a blur. Lillian and Stella stayed in the safe house, under the watchful eye of the police. They were given a small room with 2 beds, and as they lay there that night, Lillian listened to Stella's breathing, feeling a fierce protectiveness swell in her chest. They had come so far, but they weren't out of danger yet. Adam was still out there, still a threat, and until he was caught, Lillian couldn't let her guard down. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. Lillian's heart leapt into her throat, but it was just Detective Harris, his expression serious. "We've located Adam," he said quietly. "He was spotted near your old neighborhood, Lillian. He's been asking around about you and Stella." Lillian's blood ran cold. "Is he under arrest?" "Not yet. We're moving in, but he's been slippery. I just wanted to let you know, we're close." As he left, Lillian turned to Stella, who was sitting on the bed, her face pale and drawn. "He's going to find us, isn't he?" Stella whispered, her voice trembling. "No," Lillian said fiercely. "He won't. We're safe here. They'll catch him, and then we can start over. Really start over." But hours passed with no word, and Lillian's nerves were stretched thin. She couldn't stop pacing, her mind filled with worst-case scenarios. What if he found them? What if he tried to hurt Stella, to take her away again? Then, just as dusk began to fall, her phone rang. It was Detective Harris. "Lillian, we've got him," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Adam's in custody. He won't be able to hurt you or Stella ever again." Lillian felt a sob of relief escape her, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Detective. Thank you so much." Hanging up, she turned to Stella, her heart swelling with love and relief. "It's over, Stella. He's been arrested. We're safe." Stella's eyes filled with tears, her face crumpling with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Really? It's really over?" "Yes," Lillian whispered, pulling her daughter into her arms. "It's over. We're safe." They held each other, both of them crying, the weight of the past weeks and years finally lifting. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding on, savoring the knowledge that they were free. The following days were filled with legal proceedings, statements, and meetings with lawyers. Stella had to testify, to confront Adam one last time. But she did so with a quiet strength that made Lillian's heart swell with pride. Adam was charged with multiple counts, including kidnapping and identity fraud. His fate was sealed, and there would be no more running, no more lies. After the trial, Lillian and Stella stood outside the courthouse, the sun shining down on them, the future spread out before them like a blank canvas. "What now?" Stella asked, her voice soft, hopeful. "Now," Lillian said, smiling, "we start over. We build a life together. Whatever that looks like." Stella nodded, a small, tentative smile forming on her lips. "I'd like that. A lot." They walked away from the courthouse, their steps light, their hearts full. For the first time in years, Lillian felt truly at peace. She had found her daughter, and now they had a future to build. A future filled with love, hope, and the promise of a new beginning. No more secrets, no more lies. Just the two of them, ready to face whatever came next. And Lillian knew, deep in her heart, that they would face it together, stronger than ever before. We hope you were moved and inspired by our story. We want to hear your opinion. Leave a comment below, share your impressions, and your own stories of resilience and hope. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next emotional videos. Join us on this journey and follow more incredible stories. See you next time.